Good day and welcome to this latest episode of If Walls Could Talk. My name is John White, editor of Walls and Ceilings. And joining us today, no stranger to us, Mr. Mike Griffin. He's National Director of Sales at Demand Products. Mike is also very involved in the industry. He sits on boards in particular. Well, he's sat on several boards, but this year he currently is sitting on the TLPCAs. And he's also one of Walls and Ceilings' own editorial advisory board. And in addition to Mike, we have Trey Harris of Quikrete. He's Texas Regional Manager. And both of them are fresh off the plane from last week's TLPCA annual trade show and convention, which returned to Margaritaville this year. That's, I think, Greater Houston, we could say. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good. How are you?
We're doing very well. Thanks for joining us. I know it's been a busy last week for you, so I want to get to it. Trey, let's start off with you. As you also sit on TLPCA's board, how was the show? What were a couple highlights? Any association news? Some of the seminars? Tell us about it.
It was a good show. A little warm for being in Houston, as always. It's always, it's humid down there. But at the Margaritaville, it was a good show. We had a good turnout, better than expected, with being returning back to there only after 1 year. But it was a good show. Had a really good turnout. A lot of contractors, a lot of suppliers. One of the new things that we did this year, brand new to the TLPCA, was the live auction. What we did is the TLPCA decided to do a live auction this year to help raise money for the workforce development. Now, workforce development has always been talked about in the TLPCA, but it's been very shortcoming as far as what's happened. One of the things that happened this year was when David Long with Silver Stars Plastering got onto the board as president. He made a promise that we were going to have changes in our workforce development. He came to me in the very beginning of his tender and said, "Would you please be on our board?" And I said, "Sure, but only if you're serious about the workforce development." And of course he was, and we had 4, 5, 6 events that we did throughout the year. And then we presented everything that we did for the TLPCA for workforce development at the convention to the entire board, all the members, and everyone who attended. We wanted to be able to show that the workforce development with the TLPCA was really starting to gain some legs underneath. Well, in order to keep this program going, every time we went out and we were doing a program to one of these high schools, is we had to beg, borrow, and lend tools and equipment and supplies and from other contractors to be able to put this on. Well, one of the things that we wanted to do is we needed to purchase and kind of have a kit for everything that we're doing for all these different high schools. So I talked it over with the board and I said, "Look, we need to get some additional funds in." They're like, "How do we do it?" I said, "Let's have a live auction." So I spent the better half of a month calling around to different contractors, different suppliers, different manufacturers, and said, "Hey, would you mind donating an item?" And we got pallets of base coat, we got truckloads of stucco, we got tools, we got gift certificates, we got a little bit of everything, even some Dallas Cowboys tickets. And we got all this stuff donated to the TLPCA, and we had a live auction. This year, for our first annual live auction, we were able to raise about $32,000. Now, with that money, we're going to use about half of it to do scholarship programs for kids that want to go into a construction trade. Now, that could be, they want to pay for a trade school, they help pay for college to be a project manager, a construction manager, whatever the case may be. About half of that's going to go for that. The other half, the board is going to vote on it later on this month about the purchase of a cargo trailer. And within that cargo trailer, we're going to put everything that we possibly need: lumber for frames, tools, equipment, power tools, supplies, stone, everything that we need is going to be put into that trailer. And then with that materials is every time we get a phone call from a school that wants to have a program done, we can just hook to it and go, so that we can have a good program to be able to start some of this workforce development in these high schools to get these kids interested in this trade, so that later on that they have a job that they can walk into. The day they walk off that stage for graduation from high school, they can walk onto a job on Monday with a plastering contractor and start making some money.
Well, that does kind of bleed into the labor question, so I want to come back to that in a moment. That's a great initiative, though, through the association and its members. So well done. I definitely want to hear an update on what happens there and just how it develops. So, Mike, this year was a little poignant for you in the best possible way. So, from what I understand, the TLPCA did award you something. So, hey, congratulations, but what was it?
I am the recipient this year of the Lifetime Achievement Award within the TLPCA. It's a 73-year-old organization. I've taken a look at the list of the other previous recipients of it, and I'm pretty shocked and surprised that I actually got the actual award at this point in time. I mean, when Trey referenced David Long, the president, when he called to tell me he was getting it, I thought he was messing with me. And when he assured me that he wasn't, I mean, you've known me for a long time, John, and I was speechless. That doesn't happen very often. So I'm quite honored to have received that award.
We're certainly proud of you, my man. So it's well deserved. Frankly, don't exercise such humility. I mean, you deserve this, and I'm proud of you. We all are.
Thank
So,
you, sir.
when did this happen? Was that closing night in Trey? I also want to come back to the auction. Were those things did they wrap up the show on the last night of the thing? Is that when you were given the award? Is that when
Well, I was given, you've been to the show before, there wasn't the last day because typically, I mean, Trey, once I accepted it, Trey let the board know, and so did I, that generally speaking, I'm not there on the last night. I usually get out of there. So the manufacturer's dinner, which was the night before, that's when I was presented the award in front of the group. And it was a proud and humbling moment. It was pretty cool. I appreciated that. It was nice. They
Excellent.
adjusted the schedule for me, which was pretty cool.
And Trey, when was the auction?
The auction was on the last night, during the award ceremony. So we had the reception. Then we started the silent auction, which we do every year. And we had the 50-50 raffle going as well. And then the live auction. And then we started with the dinner and the rest of the program.
Yeah, you guys usually wrap up that show in a fun way. And, I love going there, and I'm sorry I couldn't make it this year. In fact, I thought Margaritaville was a fun location. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed that. Hey, I want to get into just something maybe outside of association news, and let's just I wanted to ask you about Texas in particular. And Trey, you might have the greater knowledge of it, though Mike, of course, does. But, you know, Texas still appears to have some massive growth. And I don't mean just in construction, but just as a state, it's always growing. And I'm going to cite San Antonio. It seems greater Houston and Austin. I'm sure there are other cities that I'm not even naming, but is that the pulse you guys got from the show?
Yeah, Texas is always going to grow. I mean, largest state in the United States next to Alaska, but we're always growing. I mean, you look at each individual market, the major metropolitans are compacted, and there's not a lot of growth right in the major metropolitan areas. But each one of the cities, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, wherever you go, they're growing outwards. They just keep growing outwards. And what's happening with this industry is, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I live in a little bitty town called Rockwall, which is about 30 miles east of Dallas. And it's come out this far where we've seen land prices triple in the last 10 years. So we know that the markets are coming out. So even though the major metropolitan areas like Houston and Dallas and whatnot, right there in that city center, there's not a lot of growth there, but it's the growth outside of those cities. So the cities are continuing to just expand further and further out. So we're seeing a good bit of development, which means it's getting larger. It's not just right there in the city. It's just growing all the way around the marketplaces. And to be able to handle that, we've got to get more labor out there. These contractors are bidding more, and so they need more labor to be able to supply it. And that's the reason, we're really focusing on that workforce development. The average age of a craftsman right now in this industry is late 30s, early 40s, and even older. And these guys are going to retire in 10 years, or they're going to be looking for something maybe a little bit easier in 10 years. And we have to be able to get these high schools more interested to get some younger generation into this trade, or we're not going to be able to handle it. And that's a bad thing, because if we start getting into problems where we can't handle the labor force of doing a job, that's when architects and engineers start speccing something else for that wall. And then that can be a bad thing as far as, how much wall space that we actually get.
I'm sure that was actually probably a big part of the discussion throughout the show, maybe officially or just amongst colleagues and all that. So labor is always going to be that issue. But now I suppose with, what's going on with basically the ICE situation, and I really don't want to get political on it, but I'm sure that's at the forefront, right?
Yes, ICE has always been a problem, as far as getting quality laborers, legal laborers has always been an issue. But most of the contractors are doing their job. They're talking with the guys, checking documentation to make sure that we don't have these kind of problems on job sites. But I mean, it is an issue that's discussed. Yes.
Now, has e-verification been revamped, rehauled? I mean, some people feel it's faulty, but it still seems like the best method there is.
E-Verified, I'm not as familiar as I probably should be with that. E-Verified is usually what the contractors have to use to be able to make sure that the workers and everything are documented correctly, and it is correct. E-Verified typically only comes up, though, a lot of times on schools or government buildings or city buildings. Some of the other projects that are out there, whether it's multifamily or retail or something, typically they don't have to be E-Verified. But on the jobs that do have to be one, the contractors are usually not having that much of a problem in getting it done. But if it does expand out to other industries and other types of projects, then it will become a problem.
Now, Mike, I want to move on to you because, what you heard down there in Texas, does that more or less reflect what you're seeing throughout the country?
It is a lot of what we're seeing across the country, and that's why I think that we're seeing what's going on within the state of Texas, that they're taking a real initiative to start getting into the high schools with our particular trade. And when we get into the other trades like masonry and the bricklaying guys, they already have programs that are established in various, locations before you get into secondary education, be it a trade school. On the plaster side of things, in stucco and yeast, I have not seen that. So that's why this initiative that's being done in Texas is something I think is going to be seen and observed from a national level and probably duplicated or try to duplicate it on our side of it. The masonry industry has done a good job of it to this point.
Now, as we wrap things up, just on a very macro level, how do you feel about the industry right now? Are we still looking good? Are products still moving? People still winning bids? Development happening? Are things slowing down? Are we due for a correction? What say you?
I think that it's still growing. I mean, right now we got, whatever the economy is. I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to go into all that. But I mean, there is plenty of work out there. People are bidding. The big thing is we have to have people that know how to do the installations correctly and trained to do it, because although it's not a overly complicated industry, it's not as simplistic as some people think. And the attention to detail, proper prep. It's like when you're building a property, you know, the foundation has to be correct in order for the rest of the building to be correct. The foundation of an installer of these types of systems needs to be correct so that we don't run into any issues.
Well, on that note, I finally want to wrap things up. Did Eddie or anyone at the association announce next year's show, just a location?
I don't, off the top of my head, I should know, but I don't.
It's in Marble Falls next year.
Marble Falls, that sounds unique, and I'm not familiar with that. Where is that, Trey?
Marble Falls is in the hill country, so it's right outside of Austin and San Antonio. But it's considered the hill country, and it's a beautiful resort. We've been there before, but it's been about 10, 12 years. I believe it's, don't hold me to this, but I believe it is Horseshoe Bay in Marble Falls is where it is being hosted at next year.
Okay, now that rings a bell. So that sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to that. And for those listeners, that typically is the middle to end of June for this annual show. It's always a great time. I want to thank Trey Harris and Mike Griffin for their time spent. It's busy, but anyhow, gentlemen, good job. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm John Wyatt, and thank you for listening.